Welcome, I'm Jon Caldara, the president of the Independence Institute and your devil's advocate. Politics never sleeps in this town, even in the off session. So to find out what's going on in the world, let's start off. It's our good friend Eric Stokols from Fox 31.
Eli, but
Did I say
who's
Eric
counting?
again?
You're old, so I don't blame you for that stuff.
And somebody from the old media, from the Denver Post, now on the editorial page, Tim Hoover.
That's right.
How do you like it?
It's great so far. I've been
Better
having
than
fun.
reporting?
You know, it's different, but
whatever.
you get to have fun, and the hours are a whole lot better, I'll tell you that.
Really?
Oh, God, yes.
Yeah. Never mind. There was a bad joke there. I'm not going to do it. Let's get rolling. First of all, the tax increase. The governor, you broke the story, but now it's all over. The governor, who was wishy-washy about the billion-dollar tax increase that he signed the bill to put on the ballot, is now, well, hot and cold, but now he's more lukewarm and heating up. What happened?
Well, he decided that the best way for this to come out would be if he just mentioned it or started lobbying for it at a meeting of the Colorado Forum, which is a group of business leaders. So that was, some breakfast meeting this week, and no press release, no formal speech, press conference, anything like that. And it's kind of just John's style. I mean, he thinks these things through. Look, nobody ever really doubted that he was going to get on board. He did sign the bill. He said, well, I don't know what they're going to come up with as far as what the actual tax hike will look like, but I'm probably going to support. I have my preferences. He's been kind of wishy-washy, as he tends to be, but nobody is
Hickenlooper, wishy-washy.
Nobody's shocked that he's supporting it.
There's a name for that.
There's a name for that.
I think what Republicans are hitting him on, and I don't know how impactful it'll be, but they're starting to sort of show a pattern going back to the Dunlap decision, everything that, they're talking about leadership, and they're saying, look, if you're going to come out and support this, do it emphatically. And they're saying he whispered it because he did it behind closed doors. For whatever reason, the governor thought that was the best way, the smartest way to let this out and to say, yes, okay, I'm on board with this release now that or this initiative now that we know what it is. But I think, that opened up the door for Republicans to say, once again, this governor is kind of, whispering. He's just not actually planting a flag and showing leadership.
The big question will be, will he use that old mayoral magic for tax increases? This guy could raise taxes and debt like no other man I've ever seen. Jumping out of airplanes, walking around with cartoon characters from A to G, or heading out there with the kids, riding the choo-choo trains. I mean, the guy, when he commits, he commits. Will he be the leader of this statewide tax hike?
I'll tell you what, he's definitely going to need a backup shoot for this one, because this isn't like the prior tax increases that he's championed. Let's be clear. In 20 years under Tabor, there has been exactly one statewide tax increase passed. Exactly one. Okay? I don't count Ref C, because Ref C did not increase any rate of tax. However, the tax increase on cigarettes passed. Why? Because people hate smokers, and it's not them, and it's something gross, and let's tax them. That's the only time it's ever passed. Other tax increases, 5 or 6 of them, have all gotten shot down, including most recently the Prop 103, which was a huge tax increase for education.
And this is yet another huge tax increase.
It's not quite not nearly as huge, but it is.
$1 billion is huge to me.
The other one was 3 times as large. Right. So, but the point is that this is, for him, this would be the biggest risk politically for something like this that he's ever taken. And it's not unlike these things, highways, schools, things that appeal directly to the parochial interests of people, right? You can envision a new train in Denver. You can envision a highway around at your house getting fixed or whatever. But for something just vague as, education generally. Voters don't seem to.
We don't really know where the money's going to. That's why Walker Stapleton, the state treasurer, says, well, it's going to go to bail out a failed PARA system, the retirement system. The other part here is, in order to pass a tax increase here, unless you're beating up on smokers, and I agree, you have to, they're not loved, you have to get this coalition together. And I don't see a coalition going here, because the business groups that went on to Ref C and D, they're not showing up right now, whether it's a chamber or Colorado Concern and others. I'm not seeing them come to the plate.
I don't know that he'll get the. You're right, probably in the sense that all of the, the armies of the supporters, unlike these prior ones with Ref C and others, they haven't been lined up ahead of time. But there's going to be a lot of folks out there.
And it speaks to why he might have announced this or started proselytizing to groups of business leaders. You're right, those are the folks he's really going to need. This is a heavy lift. It's a lot easier on your side to sit there and fight something like this and say, it's a tax increase, 'cause generally people don't like those. And the para issue is one that I know Republicans are going to highlight a lot to create that doubt that, is this money really going to the classroom? Is it going to be as nice and happy as what the governor and the proponents are eventually going to be selling? But it's going to take a ton of money and a lot of different interests pulling in the same direction to get this passed, and that's to get it passed by just 1 or 2%.
Not a single Republican voted for it in the legislature. Now, usually, even with Rep C and D, several Republicans peeled off. Usually, you want to pass something in Colorado that is, nobody can argue this ain't a tax hike. This is a tax hike.
But that may say more about Republicans than it does about this measure. I mean, anymore, the litmus test is not did you vote for a tax hike, but did you vote to even send a tax hike to voters to let them decide? Anymore, even that is considered verboten.
I don't know about that. I think it depends. It's happened before. The one place
recently.
The one place you don't need to worry about this happening ever will be North Colorado, the new state, which is set to ribbon cutting in just a few weeks. The new state of North Colorado. There's some movement on here. I mean, I was surprised how much play. It was fun to begin with, but it got a lot of play because lots of counties started thinking, you know what, I want to join. Now I'm hearing something. Help me out with this one. They're changing their tactic.
Well, it gets play for two reasons. One, it's ridiculous, and we gravitate towards the ridiculous.
And here I am.
And two, it did give voice to a lot of the frustration felt by folks in rural Colorado. No one's going to secede and form a 51st state. It's just not going to happen. Everybody knows that. Maybe even the folks who were out there, thumping their chest saying we're doing this. When the legislature ended and he signed 252 into law, the renewable energy mandate, which was sort of the last straw, these folks said. They had a meeting this week and they said, okay, well, we actually can't do that. What can we do? And they're down to trying to change the way Senate seats, I believe, are apportioned so that instead of doing it based on population and having each Senate district represent roughly the same number of people, they want one Senate district per county, which would give, Weld County, Morgan County, whatever, the exact same voice in the state Senate as Denver.
Right now, as far as it's apportioned, the Colorado State House and the Colorado State Senate, they're done the same way. Each district is supposed to have the same amount of population as any other district. And so if you're going to get back to what the founders did for the federal government, you want something that is more by the area. I understand the frustration.
Except the founders didn't want that for the states. The founders
wanted 2 senators per state for the whole state, though.
For you're talking about U.S. senators,
Yeah,
but
US senators.
They let the states do. I mean, what would you do in the case of Nebraska, which has a unicameral legislature?
I don't worry about Nebraska.
I mean, they may become part of it. I don't know, but I mean, the thing about it is, this is a classic case of sound and fury signifying nothing. I mean, there's not a chance that either of these two things. First of all, there's a 1960s federal court ruling that says you can't do that. Okay, legislatures have to be apportioned on the basis of population. But secondly, just politically trying to pull this off. I mean, Broomfield should have the same level of representation in the Senate that Denver does, that Routt County does.
But let me say the frustration is not just genuine, it's deserved. In that, I understand, elections have consequences. With redistricting, so few seats are truly rural seats. You take a look at the Senate districts, 35 Senate seats, only a handful, maybe 5 or 6, are truly rural Senate districts. Each and every other one reaches up into suburban or urban areas. And it's no wonder why the
that's a function of the numbers. There's only 35 of the seats. And so just by dint of population and where it's set out, you're going to have a number of districts that creep into.
But this wasn't, go back a few years. Those districts looked very different, and there were more more senators that came from truly rural areas.
I don't know if that's true or if there were more senators that were Republican that sort of represented the same views as people in rural districts who didn't represent rural districts per se. They represented swing districts or districts that were maybe split. The Democrats have won so many districts.
And Denver's actually lost seats. I mean, the last go around, Denver lost a seat in the Senate. That's how you ended up with Joyce Foster bowing out to Stedman. This is not some new plan where there's more rural or fewer rural folks.
Let's remember the redistricting. The Democratic plan is what the judge chose, and it wasn't agreed on. This was the far Democratic choice. And it's for a reason. There's a reason why parties want to be in power when there's redistricting.
But just remember, they rejected.
Difference.
It was only after the Republicans rejected a bipartisan plan that had first been approved. Okay, so the first sets of plans were approved by the Reapportionment Commission with bipartisan votes, and it was the Republican Party that sued, said no, those aren't good enough. The Democratic Party then came back and said, okay. You don't like the bipartisan maps? We got some maps for you.
But this goes back.
And
those were the ones.
But yes, and it's not just the last election or the last reapportionment. This goes back a decade to the entire political metamorphosis of Colorado to the left. And this session at the Capitol may have been sort of, bared out all the fruit that's been 10 years in the making. Democrats had big majorities. They could even do gun control, not to mention all these other things that have been sitting or have been blocked by Republicans. And so I think people in rural parts of Colorado now feel like, Republicans who live in Orange County, California do. It's like, I live in a blue state, but this doesn't represent people in upstate New York. That's a blue state, and there are conservatives, and that's what's happened to Colorado. Colorado is now, at least in presidential years, and I'd say is more of a blue state than a red state or even a purple state. And I think there are people living in those communities who aren't really...
There's no way you can argue this is a purple state any longer.
I don't think so.
This is a hard... I don't want to say hardcore. This is a solid blue state. And Republicans are learning to deal with it. They're finally starting to change some of their strategies. But let me ask you, this rural versus urban dichotomy comes out when we have, for the first time, a urban governor. I mean, he's the governor.
It's not the first time. Ritter was an urban governor.
Right, but
Owens was an urban governor.
But this guy was the mayor of Denver.
Sure.
And both Ritter and Hick share the similarity. They never were in the legislature, and I don't think either one of them really understood how that world works well. Unlike Romer and Lamb and Owens, these are the guys who they were masters of controlling legislation. Hick this year seemed like he was a pinball, and the legislature were pushing him wherever he wanted.
Well, that's the way it was this year, just because he had two Democratic chambers, and that changed the dynamic, and it pushed him in directions that he never wanted to go in. But I want to say,
but he didn't veto a single one of, what is it, 441 bills?
Well, but you got to understand that the threat of veto headed off many bills. So it was like they were quietly vetoed before they ever got to his desk.
Yeah, he did that with a ton of oil and gas bills. I mean, the Democrats' oil and gas
the death
package,
penalty
none
bill
of that went through.
And
the death penalty, but that's his style. He's going to come in and undercut these things, get the votes. He's going to do it behind the scenes. He doesn't like the mess of vetoing and doing a public.
And he did veto. I just want to point out, he did veto.
I'm now convinced he's an incredible moderate.
He did veto a bill his first year that was a not a small Democratic priority. It was a Medicaid bill, and the way it was being implemented, he didn't like it. And so, I mean,
But gentlemen, can we say, this year was the most left-leaning, successfully Democratic legislative session I've ever seen in my 40 years here in Colorado. Is it a high watermark?
High,
God,
you mean, in other
so.
words, not ever so far. I have to think so. I think the strategy was to get a huge laundry list of stuff done, get all this super liberal stuff out of the way, and then go on to less liberal things, and survive the 2014 elections, which
I'm seeing the headline in the editorials tomorrow: super liberal legislative session.
Like 3 months too late.
Super liberal.
It is super liberal. I just want to post these saying super liberal.
Can I just say one thing?
No, you can't say even one thing.
This whole notion of the war on rural Colorado and the against. Let me tell you something. 9/10 of this, if not more, is all about guns. this whole notion that people on the streets of Greeley are talking about the renewable energy bill. It's baloney. No, they're not.
It's not baloney. Let me tell you.
They're not.
Hold still.
All of the commentary and all of the chatter except for the select, people that congregate around the Capitol in that orbit.
I tell you what. No,
it's all about guns.
Let me
That's
say,
what that is in rural.
Guns. Guns certainly are a wonderful symbolic part of this. I talked to a family. They own a sawmill on the western slope. They pay $17,000 a month in an electric bill for their family business. Now, thanks to this electric hike, they're talking about who they're going to have to lay off if they're even going to be able to stay
So
in
they've
business.
already gotten new higher electric bills?
No, they are trying to prepare for when it happens because they're working on those margins. Business people have to make decisions about what they think is going to happen in the future.
Right, but I've not heard that as of yet these supposedly monster electric bills have hit customers.
No, they haven't hit yet. I'll
My
concede
point is,
that.
I
I'll
don't
concede
think
that. But are you telling me that those businesses in rural Colorado that use utilities and those families in rural Colorado that go with rural electrics, and remember, these are not-for-profit organizations, you're telling me there's not going to be a sizable impact? There will be, and they know it. Guns might be symbolic,
what
but
I'm
this
telling
is real.
you is that for folks in rural Colorado, the issue that they've latched onto and focused is guns. It's not anything else. That's who we hear from. That's what all of the traffic on Twitter is. That's what all the social media traffic is. That's what everything is, all the commentary. People calling in, they're not calling in complaining about the solar mandates and this, that. They are calling about guns. That's what's got them
you talk to the
aggravated.
business. You talk to the small business people who make up the NFIB.
A select group who are plugged into political messaging.
The small business people who have to deal not only with now the electric mandates, but also small businesses who have the new lawsuit abilities don't have the same level of protection of getting sued. I forget which bill.
Well, they
that
don't
was.
have special protection from getting sued.
Right.
That's what you mean.
Yeah. So now they've lowered the threshold. So small businessmen are going to be worried more about liabilities like that. These affect real people.
You know, I think the FASTER bill. Do you remember the FASTER bill when they raised the DMV fees and all the farmers said, "I got 10 or 15 vehicles. I got tractors. I got all these things, and I got my registration fees just doubled on all of them." That hurts. I think there is a pattern of, urban lawmakers and an urban-dominated legislature coming up with legislation that maybe they don't realize the consequences for people in rural parts of the state. I don't think it's just the gun bill or just the energy bill, or I think it's a pattern. I think that's been there. The gun thing really writ that on a larger level than we've seen before.
And I've actually spent, because of the gun issue, I've spent more time in the rural areas talking to people about our lawsuit with the 55 sheriffs. And I'll tell you, it's not just about guns. And the Post, I love you, but it does have that.
Don't lie.
No, I love you.
Okay, we have a thing, but
we have
that's
a
all
thing,
right.
but that's legal now. The Post has the urban-centric view of Colorado. This governor has an ultra-urban-centric view of Colorado.
You know where political power is concentrated in this state? Urban Denver.
And
that's where
but that hasn't
you win
been the place.
Denver
That hasn't
and
been
the
the way
suburbs.
ever.
You win statewide
I understand,
elections.
but more so now.
But Arapahoe County is not a red county anymore, John.
Agreed.
I mean, you're talking about all these suburbs that have gone from purple and even crept into blue.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is that Republicans are always looking for these bogeymen. It's always the Colorado Democracy Alliance. Well, it's Tim Gill. Oh, well, you know what it is. It's the illegal immigrant voter fraud. That's what it is. And it's like the Democrats want nothing more than for you guys to continue to talk about that. Because what they don't want you to do is ever go to Nate Silver's website or ever look at any kind of actual demographics or data. God forbid that somebody with any kind of actuarial statistical training on the Republican Party does that, because you're going to start figuring out how they win.
That is a criticism I will take. Republicans are slowly starting to wake up to that fact. we all can agree. Democrats put together a game plan. They know the rules of politics better. They play the game of politics better, and now they're reaping the rewards.
Well, and the changing demographics are just accelerating that. I mean, if the House Republicans in Congress shoot down immigration reform with a path to citizenship, they're not doing themselves any favors with Hispanics going forward. And so it's figuring out not just that Democrats do a better job analyzing data, but just look at the population.
The center
patterns.
has changed. There's that too. It's not just a
Let me-
wickedly evil knowledge of data. The politics have changed.
The politics have changed. But let's add something here. There are potentially 2 recalls going on, and this is largely about guns. And I've never seen a recall that has garnered this much attention. I've seen recall threats to the point where the incumbent has to jump ship and get replaced. This Morse recall is a fascinating thing to watch. And it's also fascinating to see how much they're fighting it. They're fighting it, they're fighting it, they're fighting it. In the end, this thing's going to happen. I think it's going to happen. I don't see how they're going to override the Secretary of State's on this.
No, I don't know. With legal challenges, it's all uncharted waters. I don't think anyone knows if this
and by the way,
supposed technicality is a technicality or not.
They hired Mark Gruskin, who is known for using process to slow things down. Really, the goal of this is to make sure that the election, the special election, ends up on the general election day. And he will likely be successful because that's what he does. He just slows things down. But let's get to this. If there is a recall, and I think there will be, will John Morse do the fight all the way through, or will he do what others have done and jump out beforehand?
It's about more than John Morse's political future. This is a guy who's term limited next year.
Right.
This is about the message long term on this issue. Democrats in this state did something very few lawmakers in any other state actually did in advancing these kinds of laws. And so Democrats thought they'd have to defend them next year. They said, well, we better not lose the Senate or else everyone's going to say you can't do gun control. Now they've got Morse twisting on a stick here, going around. Everybody's like, well, what do we do? Is it worth a couple $1 million from Democracy Alliance and from rich funders to fight this, knowing that you might lose still? Or is it smarter to, like you mentioned, have Morse step aside at the last minute after they're out of challenges and delays and insert a Democrat and say, okay, nice try, but this guy's in there and we can go fight this battle next year. That's a lot of money for one seat where a guy's term limited.
Right.
But at the same time, a retreat from Morse, if Morse steps aside and says, all right, you got me, but we're not going to have a recall. We're going to keep the seat in Democratic hands. That's a short-term victory, but it's also a victory for the recall folks because they forced it. And the message is he knew he wouldn't survive or he didn't think he would survive, and it still shows weakness. It shows, I won't say remorse, that's what the organizers like to say, but it shows that, hey, maybe this wasn't the smartest thing to do politically, and that's what the organizers want. They want, the NRA wants it, MAGPA wants it. They all want to send that message that if you do this as a lawmaker, there will be consequences, and people in other states will see.
And this is, I got to say, this will be a short-term, if this were to either recall him or he bows out and does the vacancy committee thing, it's a short-term victory because what will happen going forward is they'll make sure that the turnout for candidates in these kinds of districts is never that low, ever again. So that it can't ever be that easy to get that many signatures.
It's not a short-term victory. It's a long-term victory because while this should be between John Morse and his constituents, now that Bloomberg's money is going to flow in, and I hope the NRA comes in to match it, now it becomes a national issue. What happens is if John Morse loses this recall, and I think he will, then every state legislator across the country realizes, you know what? I learned just what Bill Clinton learned, which is you don't touch this issue. And Bill Clinton warned Bloomberg about it.
Yeah, although I guess the question will be, Morse proposed some things that were more extreme, the assault weapons, but all these other things, which polling showed was supported by the public. The limit on magazines, the
only when the public didn't know all the facts about the internals of it.
Perhaps, but long term, I just want to make a point about recalls too. It'll encourage folks to do more of these recalls, which the Post has opposed. We believe that recalls should be for malfeasance in office. Otherwise, you're basically having an election every month.
No, only if you don't understand how difficult it is for citizens to put this together. Even in a district where you only needed 7,000
It's difficult
folks,
to win an
it's
election.
difficult.
They paid
It's
for the
difficult to
signatures.
win an election.
Magpul or the NRA or whoever gave a bunch of money to this 501c4. They go out, they pay this company, they get the signatures. I mean, recalls,
There's
not
only
to
7,000,
diminish the
right?
work that the organizers did and the volunteers and the real grassroots effort down there that it does take. But when you pay money for these signatures, you're going to get them. There's a reason it didn't happen in other
Good
districts.
God Almighty! Let me ask you: how many initiatives have you put forward, or you put forward? I'm the guy who's put forward many of them. I know what it takes to actually get signatures
And
to
you'll
raise
say
money.
that it's really hard, right?
Yes, I will
And then you
say-
try to go to another state where the threshold is double. You see
Right,
how
but,
hard it
but,
is then.
But to say there's going to be an election every month, no, that's bull. Because it is a difficult thing to do. Look at the Haron effort. That one
How many
had,
signatures did they need?
They needed
like
they needed-
7,000, 10,000, something
In
like
Haron?
that?
Horses, they needed 71, 78.
I mean, that's not
But
many.
no, but in Haron's district,
Needed about
they
10,000 or so?
needed many more than that.
11,000.
Not a whole lot more. A
No,
few
it was more.
thousand
They
more.
barely
Point-
crossed the threshold, but
But the point being, I don't think they paid for a signal. I don't think they paid for a signature there. That was a grassroots effort. The point being, these recalls are real. These recalls, whether you think they're symbolic, I think people in politics and people in those districts know just how powerful they
Well, it's
are.
just sort of a sore loser's election. I mean, that's what elections are for. Like you win, you talk about ideas,
but
and
there
you
is
win.
no, but
If
no,
somebody-
there is no
if
election.
Morse
There
had
is
been-
no election for Morse again. He is term limited. He is the president of the Senate. He put forward ridiculously bad ideas. He masterminded how the bad ideas
So
would
the-
go through.
the
Let me
first
finish
year of
this.
your second term?
So now this is the only way that people in his district can truly express on him is to recall him, and that's what they're doing.
They can
Why would you
express
take
it
it
in
away?
the next election.
And they can also express it now, real fast.
But this is a part of our process. I mean,
Right.
you're right. This is a part of our process. It's not easy, and so it's going to happen, and it is going to send a message. I mean, but I think
We're out.
next year.
Eli, thank you. I'll call you Eric still. Tim, thank you. Thank you. We'll see you next week.
All right.